I've always been a big fan of New Year's.
Okay.
Always been a big fan. Ever since I can remember, we always went really hard on New Year's. High school, college,
Right.
LA. Fuck, man. Look, until you get married, until I got married, I went hard. Went real hard on New Year's.
Mm-hmm.
A buddy of mine was a big club promoter, and so we used to get into all the shit when typically you shouldn't be able to.
Right.
I remember in 99, 2000, it was like the Mecca. I believe 99 was in New York, and my buddy, one of my best friends, Chris, had called the clubs that he knew. We rented out a table at one of those like underground fucking nightclubs in New York City that was like super exclusive, where it was like every table was a celebrity, and you essentially had to be a celebrity to do it. So we lied. Chris lied and said, "Hey, I'm calling. I represent the guy on Passions, the soap opera. Remember with the dummy Timmy?
Yeah.
Yeah, like it was like a person, and then when people weren't looking, it turned into a dummy. We knew nobody watched it, so like you couldn't say, because back then, like 99, like right in there, soap operas were huge, still massive. Now there's not too many on, but like you had Days of Our Lives, General Hospital, all of that shit. So if you lied and said you were on one of those shows and you got popped, chances are you would get caught because people were watching that and be like, hey, you're not on that fucking show.
Right.
Nobody watched Passions.
Got it.
It was a new soap. It was on, and everybody knew it from the wooden dummy. And like when we booked out these reservations, and like we were in, I'll never forget, it was like our 3 tables in a row going down from left to right were was Puff Daddy in New York in 99. I mean, it was,
dang.
Yeah, it was going off. And then the table next to us was Claudia Schiffer and David Copperfield, because they were married.
That?
They were married, yeah.
Oh my God.
And then us. And I remember showing up at the door, and like you get there and you're at the door and you're telling people, you're like, oh my God, we get a table, it's like my buddy Chris is like, it's the guy from Passions or whatever. And it was just like, oh, whatever. And I never forget the bouncer saying, oh yeah, the one with the fucking dummy. And I was like, I know. And I was like, dude, you know what it's like to act against a fucking dummy all goddamn day? Huge laughs. Everybody loved me. Like, boom, we got ushered in, got our table. And like, we paid for it, by the way. Because even though like Diddy and things like that, you still have to pay for your shit.
Sure.
So we paid for it and got in. And there was like another side club attached to it that had like 2,000 people, and it was like Gen Pop. But then the separate club that was underground, that was like the actual party. That's where I ran. That was also where I ran into Jeter at this place, because it was exclusive. Maybe only 150, 200 people in this motherfucker, and it was awesome. Like the whole night was fucking rad, dream, bottles, the whole thing, like walking by, staring at Claudia Schiffer, and David Copperfield would just give you these eyes of like, dude, you don't understand. I just took your wallet, your watch.
Right.
And when you get home, your bed's going to be missing.
Right.
Like he gave you those eyes. Like he was the creepiest fucking dude on the planet, where you're just like, oh God.
Still.
Yeah.
He still is.
Yeah. And I think the Pussy Posse was rolling around back then. It was DiCaprio, Tobey Maguire, those guys, like that's what they called themselves, dead serious. And Lucas Haas. Lucas Haas.
He's in the Pussy.
Yeah, exactly.
Posse.
Look up Google Lucas Haas.
I know him.
Yeah, he is not good looking.
No. He was in a couple. They tried to make him something.
They still look. He's best friends with DiCaprio. He's still in a lot of shit. I did a movie with him. I did a movie called the Darwin Awards with him. Nice guy, friendly, kind of weird.
Sure.
But yeah, he's been rolling with those guys for fucking 20 years at this point. So I had an absolute blast. The night before, we were kind of figuring out what to do in New York, and Fish was playing at Madison Square Garden. So we got Fish tickets and took some mushrooms that night.
Ooh.
Oof.
The night before?
Yeah. The night before New Year's, and again, a friend of mine got him, and you're at Fish, and it's the polite thing to do at that point.
It's the only way to enjoy it.
Boy,
it's the only way to get into it.
I don't want to say they were laced with acid. They were laced with acid. There's no way around that.
Mushrooms laced with acid? That doesn't make any sense.
Yes, it does, and I'll tell you why. So the mushrooms themselves, if they're not strong enough, people will lace them to kind of get you there, where it's just like acid's a hard sell. Still, and it's a hard sell in New York City. It's also one of those drugs, if you get popped with it,
Right.
It's you're looking at a federal crime. You're not looking at like a mushroom weed type crime, you know? So like what they would do is if the mushrooms weren't strong enough, kind of lace them with acid, put a little acid in there to kind of boost them. So that way you felt like you weren't getting ripped off and you were, you know,
Right.
look, you're still tripping. And because that's the thing about mushrooms. You don't know how hard they are. Like some are aggressive. There's an aggressive strain and then there's not. And it's like, you know, we've all taken them where you're like, whoa, I was really the walls were melting off. There's other times where you're like, I laughed a lot and I had a good time.
Right.
But there's no way to gauge it, which is probably why that guy from California is trying to legalize them. So that way there's at least some medical grade to them so that you're even of like, all right, I know what I'm getting here.
Right.
But back then you didn't know what you were getting. So these felt laced where they were, you know, probably not the real mushrooms. And the guy was trying to juice them up a little bit to make them seem like it. And great show, Madison Square Garden. And I'm not a big, we've talked about this before in the show. I'm not a big Phish fan per se, but I enjoy them in concert. Like I think if you're going to see a Phish show, you're not going to be disappointed. Not only with the music, like because they jam and they're great. They're great musicians, but also the atmosphere, where there's always constantly shit going on. I remember that show, they had blown up 2,000 miniature cheeseburgers, beach balls. And so from the stage, they released these 2,000 miniature cheeseburgers, and those were going all over Madison Square Garden, and it was pretty dope, you know? They also did a thing with like lasers and like, you know, all kinds of shit. And they play into the environment of, all right, these guys are high or they're tripping or whatever it is. And the music suits in it. It's a blast. Like I've never not been to a Phish show and not had a good time.
Right.
It's almost impossible.
Sure.
Regardless of what you think of their music. Otherwise, but this is what started off that New Year's was. So we get out of there, and I was just like, man, I am flying right now, absolutely flying. I need to calm her down a little bit. So I talked to my buddies, and I was like, hey, everybody else was kind of tired because the show went long. Like Phish didn't give a fuck. They'll play for 4 or 5 hours, and you don't know when you show up what you're going to get, which is the magic of them. But afterwards, some of the people I was with were like, hey man, it's fucking late. I want to go back and get ready for New Year's tomorrow night. You know, we got this table and we rented it out and all these celebrities are going to be there or whatever. And I was like, all right, cool. I'm flying a little bit. I need to go to a bar. So my buddy took me to a bar and I go in tripping balls, and you're in the middle of New York City. Middle of New York City, you know, you can just grab a beer, kind of hang to yourself, million dive bars, no big deal. I walk in, and it was somebody from high school who was the bartender. Yeah. And I was like, and they were like, Ross Patterson? Oh my God, what are you doing here? And I was like, oh no. Yeah. And what are you going to say? I just took a bunch of weird.
I've been doing great. I'm tripping balls.
Yeah, I'm fantastic.
I've been getting into psychedelics. It's awesome.
It's going well.
A lot of self-medicating.
Yeah. So I immediately panicked, and I was like, took this beer, tried to make some coherent sentence, and then bounced.
They were probably like, okay.
Probably grossed out by me my whole life.
Good to see you.
Exactly.
Ross.
But that was leading into the New Year's. New Year's was a fucking blast. We did it up, crushed it, kicked the dick out of life.
Sure.
Next year was 99 going into 2000. So that was when the Y2K thing was going down, where the whole world was supposed to shut down. You remember that? Where it was just like, oh, we're all going to die. And everybody, I don't know if you were like this, but we were all watching the news because Australia always hits first. They have the first New Year's. And you were like, is the power grid going to melt down? Do they have anything left? Are we going to die? So we all sat in the hotel room. We were in Miami. And we saw, on the thing that Australia had survived. And there was a guy on the cover of Time magazine who saved the Y2K thing from happening. And no one remembers his name to this day. No one knows who it is, but he solved that algorithm or whatever the fuck it was from all of our computer systems shutting down. So that one I liked because we were going hard, thinking we were going to die.
Right.
thinking it was going to be over,
okay.
and then there was going to be an apocalypse and all this shit.
Right.
Also, we knew the Prince song, 2000 party over. It's out of time. You're out of time, and you're like, all right, cool, fuck. So they were playing that all day long. Same thing. Called, lied, said I was on Passions, and we were in Miami Beach this time. Went super hard, and there's a guy I'm going to thank at the end of this show who saved my life that night, who's the revolutionary figure of the day.
Okay.
And his name is Jordan Hunter, and I'm gonna get to that story at the end. I'm not gonna ruin it, but that was a great New Year's. Had a fucking fantastic New Year's Eve. Really went hard. The next couple were in LA. Spent one, I think, in Mexico one time. Like, I've always been a huge New Year's guy. And for me personally, it's the one day where I'll take stock on the entire year that day. Like, I don't really like to look at accomplishments or failures or any of that for the year as it's going on. But on that day, I do. I look back and I'm like, all right, what worked this year? What didn't work this year? And for whatever strange reason, New Year's Eve like means a lot, where I'm like, all right, cool. It's the one day where I look back and be like, what did I do that I can improve upon and all that shit this year, or vice versa, or celebrate something.